He was crying at my counter, hands trembling around a chipped spoon, steam fogging his glasses like a confession he hadn't planned to make. I watched him from behind the register and felt nothing rush, no triumph, no mercy, just the quiet click of a lock finally turning. I didn't know he'd cry. I only knew he'd eat. Years earlier, the betrayal had arrived dressed as a paragraph. It came folded inside a glossy magazine. Slipped beneath the door of my father's life like a knife under a Riv Critic's byline was a signature we all knew world famous. Ruthless, adored for the bodies he left behind, called my dad's stew boring. Boring. The words sat there like a verdict. My father didn't yell, he didn't protest. Read the review twice, folded the magazine, and went back to the stove the next week. The lunch rush thinned the week after that. My dad's hands shook when he chopped onions 3 months later. He died in the kitchen, heart giving out between the fridge and the sink, the stew still simmering like it always had. I stayed, inherited the diner, and the silence the town kept eating. Tourists stopped coming. The Critic moved on to bigger cities and brighter lights, collecting stars and graves. Tonight, a storm cut the highway in half and stranded him here. Fate, with a sense of humorous car, rolled in like a rumor. He stepped inside my diner and looked around the way men do when they think they're better than the roomie, recognized him instantly. The jaw thighs, trained to dissect the appetite, sharpened into a weapon. Menu? He asked, already bored. Stew, I said. Beef. He smirked, of course. The bell over the door stopped swinging. The past leaned against the counter with me. We hadn't always been enemies. We'd met once, years ago, before the review, when he passed through on a quiet tour. Me dad cookied. I served. The Critic laughed then, told stories, asked for second. She shook my father's hand and said something about honesty in food, about how simple dishes told the truth. He didn't remember that handshake when he wrote the review. I remembered everything. The signs of betrayal had been subtle, at first an adjective too sharp, a metaphor too cruel. Then the pattern emerged. Built his legend on destruction, didn't critique. He conquered. My dad was collateral. I didn't cry when my father did. He learned control. Instead he studied recipes, sure, but also contracts, reputations. Taminji learned what the Critic valued: authenticity, nostalgia, the myth of purity. Learned his weaknesses: exhaustion, cynicism, the secret hunger for something real. I waited. Tonight, I ladled the stew the way my father taught. Menno tweaks, no flourishes: beef, carrots, onions. Timeth the broth dark and patient. He placed it in front of him without ceremony. House specialty, I said. He tasted it because he was hungry and stranded, and Arrogantha took one bite, expecting to sharpen his pen. That's when his face broke. He swallowed hard. Then again, his eyes filled like a well struck by Memerith. Spoon clattered. The room seemed to shrink around him, leaving just the bowl and whatever he'd lost long before tonight. This, he whispered, is my mother's kitchen. I said, nothing. Silence is a blade if you hold it right. He ate slowly, reverently, each spoonful dismantled. Hemi watched the years peel back, watched the Critic disappear, and the child surface, undone by a dish he once murdered with a word. He asked who taught me to cook. My dad, I said. He nodded, still chewing, and knew what he was doing. I felt the shift, then the plane tightening, the hunger for justice cooling into precision. After he finished, I slid the old magazine across the counter. The review opened. The word circled in pen. Boring? Recognition hit him like a second storm. His face drained. Finally looked at me, not as a cook, not as a townie, but as consequence. I didn't know, he said. He never. You did, I said. Calm. You just didn't care. I told him about my father, about the hands that shook, about the kitchen floor. Didn't raise my voice. It didn't need to. Truth carries its own weight. He tried to apologize. Let him finish. Then I handed him a phone. Eat again, I said in camera. The video went live. World famous Critic, stranded, undone by a bowl of stew he once dismissed, spoke about cruelty disguised as taste, about critics who forget the people behind the plates, about a man who cooked honestly and paid for it. By morning, the clip had circled the Globe Noon. He'd published a retraction so sharp it cut his own reputation clean, and half sponsors, vanished invitations dried up the legend crack. He left town quietly, lighter by one myth, heavier by truth. I reopened the diner with the same menus mais do nothing fancy people. Came not for revenge, not for spectacle, but for something steady, something that didn't lie. Sometimes I think about the look on his face when the stew found him, not pain recognition, the sound a soul makes when it realizes it's been wrong for a long time. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simmers.